The acid tastes like copper and burnt ozone as it dissolves your tongue. You can't scream anymore. The air sac in your chest collapsed 3 minutes ago when the Ripper swarm burrowed through your ribcage. My name is Sergeant Matthias Kol, Cadian 8th Regiment, and I'm being digested alive inside a Tyranid bioform on Graia Prime, the real terror. I'm still conscious. The Hive Mind wants me awake for this. You think death in the Emperor's service is glorious, that it's instant lass fire to the head or a quick evisceration. But when the Great Devourer takes you, dying isn't the mercy. Being absorbed is. Your neurons firing as they're repurposed. Your memories feeding their synaptic network. I've been inside this Carnifex's digestion chamber for 6 hours. I need you to understand what happens when you become food for a god. Chapter 1. The Harvest Moon. Graia Prime's third moon hung fat and yellow over Firebase Tartarus when we got the astropathic warning. I remember thinking it looked like an infected eye, swollen and weeping in the void. 16 hours later, I'd understand why that image stuck with me. Sergeant Kol, perimeter secure, no movement in the ash wastes. Trooper Vennick's voice crackled through the vox, professional as always. The kid was barely 19 standard years, fresh from Cadia before the fall. He still had that shine in his eyes, the belief that the guard was invincible, that the Emperor's light would always prevail. I checked the Auspex readings for the 4th time that hour. Nothing, just thermal ghosts from the Prometheum refineries 12 kilometers south and the ambient radiation from Graia's forge temples. The planet had been producing Warhound Titans for 3 centuries. The Mechanicus presence here was so thick you could taste the sacred oils in every breath. Copy that, Vennick. Maintain watch rotation. And for throne's sake, keep your rebreather sealed. Last thing we need is someone getting ashlung before the real fight starts. I switched channels to command. Lieutenant Harrow, southern approach remains clear. Firebase Tartarus wasn't much. 8 Basilisk artillery pieces, 2 Lehman Russ executioners, and 247 souls from the Cadian 8th. Our orders were simple. Hold this position and provide fire support for the forge complexes if the Xenos made planetfall. The Administratum designated this world as Priority Alpha 7. In Low Gothic, that meant die before you let them have it. The warning had come 3 days prior. Inquisitor Helmund of the Ordo Xenos transmitted it personally, which meant someone important was paying attention. Shadow in the warp detected. Bioship signatures consistent with Hive Fleet behemoth patterns. Estimated arrival, 72 hours. Prepare for full-scale Tyranid assault. 72 hours to dig in, establish kill zones, and make peace with whatever god you prayed to. The Mechanicus pulled their Skitarii legions back to the Forge temples. Typical. Let the guard bleed while they protected their precious machines. I'd served on 4 worlds before Graia, Cadia, Vostroya, Talon during the Glass Plains campaign, and that nightmare on Morrigar where we lost the entire 3rd Company to Orc Weirdboys. I knew how this worked. We were the ablative armor, the meat shield, the acceptable losses. Sergeant, you should see this. Corporal Dane's voice had an edge I didn't like. Dane was 37, a veteran of the Damocles Crusade. He didn't spook easily. I found him at Observation Post 3, his magnoculars trained on the northern horizon. He handed them to me without a word. The ash wastes looked wrong. The dunes were moving, but not from wind. The movement was organic, rhythmic, like breathing. I adjusted the magnification and felt my stomach drop. The sand wasn't moving. Something underneath it was. Thousands of somethings, creating ripples across kilometers of terrain. Contact command. Now. My voice came out steady despite the ice flooding my veins. Tell them we have subsurface movement, mass formation, bearing 270. Recommend immediate artillery barrage. Belay that order. Lieutenant Harrow's voice cut through the vox. Fire control wants visual confirmation before we waste ammunition. Could be tectonic activity or... Sir, respectfully, tectonic activity doesn't move in formation. Something's burrowing toward our position. I kept the magnoculars trained on the wastes. The ripples were getting closer. Request permission to wake up the firebase. We need guns hot in 5 minutes. Denied, Sergeant. The Mechanicus reports no seismic activity. You're seeing thermal distortion from the Vox erupted with screaming. Contact! Emperor's blood! They're coming up through the ground! Observation Post 7, Western Perimeter. Trooper Killian's voice high and panicked, nothing like his usual calm. Then lass fire, dozens of weapons on full automatic. Then wet, tearing sounds that don't belong in any human throat. All units, battle stations. This is not a drill. Harrow's voice finally had urgency. Weapons free! Weapons free! I was already running, my last pistol in one hand and the Vox handset in the other. Behind me I could hear Corporal Dane shouting orders, getting the squad into defensive positions. The firebase transformed in seconds, blast shutters slamming down, heavy weapons crews spinning up their autocannons, the basilisks rotating their Earthshaker cannons toward the kill zones. But we were too slow. They hit us from underneath. The ground erupted 20 meters from my position, not like an explosion, like a birth. Soil and rockcrete fountained upward, and something pale and segmented burst from the earth. Rippers, dozens of them, each one the size of a combat hound, 4 legs ending in diamond-hard talons, jaws that were nothing but concentric rings of teeth designed for one purpose: consumption. Fire! Light them up! I emptied my las pistol into the swarm. Las bolts punched through carapace and boiled alien flesh, but there were too many. For every one we killed, 3 more clawed their way from the tunnels. Trooper Vennick was 5 meters to my right. I saw him turn, saw him register the Ripper launching at his face. He got his las rifle up in time to blast it mid-air, but 2 more hit him from behind. He went down screaming, and they started feeding immediately, not killing first, feeding. Fall back to secondary line, move! I grabbed the nearest trooper and shoved her toward the firebase. The basilisks opened up, shells screaming overhead to detonate in the ash wastes. The explosions lit up the night, and I saw what was coming. Everything. The entire horizon was moving. Not just rippers. Hormagaunts bounded forward in waves, their talons glinting in the firelight. Termagants followed. Their weapons, living weapons, flesh guns that shot beetles and acid, already spitting death. And behind them, towering over the swarm, the big ones. Carnifexes, living tanks, 4 meters tall and massing 8 tons each, covered in chitinous armor that could shrug off Lascanon fire. We had 16 hours until dawn. 247 souls in Firebase Tartarus. The Hive fleet had arrived hungry, and I was about to learn that being human meant being prey. Chapter 2. The first feeding. The thing about fighting Tyranids that the training regimens never prepare you for is the smell. It hits you first, before the killing starts. A nauseating combination of ammonia, rot, and something sweet like overripe fruit. It's the scent of alien digestion, of bioacid and enzymatic breakdown. By the time you smell it, you're already inside their kill zone. Sergeant Kol, Western Wall is collapsing. We need reinforcements now. Corporal Dane's voice competed with the thunder of heavy bolter fire. The firebase had become a circle of light and noise, surrounded by an ocean of chittering darkness. I was at the command bunker with Lieutenant Harrow, watching our defensive perimeter dissolve on the tactical display. Red icons, enemy contacts, outnumbered our green-friendly markers by factors I didn't want to calculate. The Auspex had gone haywire, overwhelmed by the sheer biomass converging on our position. Sir, we need to request extraction. There's no holding this position. I kept my voice level, professional. Inside, I was screaming. The tactical situation wasn't just bad. It was mathematically impossible. We were being swarmed by an enemy that didn't care about casualties, that got stronger with every soldier they consumed. Harrow stared at the display, his jaw clenched. He was 42, a career officer from a minor noble house on Scintilla. Good man, competent commander, but he'd never faced Xenos before. His entire service record was putting down rebellions and enforcing administratum tithe collections. He was thinking like this was a human enemy, that there were flanks to exploit and morale to break. We have our orders, Sergeant. Hold Firebase Tartarus at all costs. The Forge temples need time to evacuate their data archives. His hand moved to the Vox, then stopped. Besides, extraction isn't coming. I just received confirmation. The entire orbital defense grid is engaged. 6 bioships in high anchor with more dropping spores every hour. Every transport and gunship is committed to evacuation operations at the primary hive, which meant we were expendable. Acceptable losses. I'd known it the moment we were assigned to this firebase, but having it confirmed still felt like a kick to the chest. Understood, sir. I'll reinforce the western wall. I grabbed my last rifle and checked the charge pack. 78%. I had 4 more packs on my webbing, plus 2 frag grenades and a tube of counterseptic gel. Standard guard loadout, pathetically inadequate. The firebase was chaos. Lasfire lit up the night in staccato bursts of red and blue. Autocannons hammered away, their tracers drawing lines of fire into the swarm. One of the Lehman Rust tanks was burning, its turret blown clean off by a Carnifex's biocannon. I could see the crew trying to escape through the emergency hatch, but the Hormagaunts were faster. They went down under a tide of pale, scything claws. I reached the western wall just as it broke. A Carnifex, smaller than some I'd seen, maybe a juvenile, smashed through the rockcrete barricade like it was cardboard. The creature was nightmare-given form. 4 arms ending in scythe claws, each as long as a man, a massive head dominated by a maw that could swallow a human whole, and 2 smaller pairs of limbs tucked against its chest. Chitin armor plates covered every surface, pockmarked with las-burn scars that had barely penetrated. Heavy weapons! Target that Carnifex! I dove behind a supply crate as the beast's biocannon spat a glob of acid that dissolved 3 troopers instantly. Their screams cut off so fast I wondered if they'd had time to feel it. Trooper Hask was on the heavy bolter, pouring mass-reactive shells into the creature's center mass. Each impact blew fist-sized chunks from its carapace, but it kept coming. Behind it, rippers poured through the breach like water through a dam, their jaws clicking in anticipation. Fall back! Secondary defense line! I fired on full auto, dropping 2 rippers. Corporal Dane appeared at my shoulder, his plasma gun glowing hot. Sergeant, we can't hold this position. We need to... The Carnifex's tail whipped around, faster than something that size had any right to move. It caught Dane across the chest and launched him 6 meters. I heard his ribs snap from where I was standing. He hit the ground and didn't get up. I should have stayed to help him. That's what the guard trains you to do. Never leave a man behind. But I'd seen what Tyranids do to wounded soldiers. Dane was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. The rippers reached him first. They didn't kill him quickly. I ran. The secondary line was barely holding. 23 soldiers behind hastily erected barricades, firing into a mass of chitin and teeth that seemed endless. I found Trooper Valen, a heavy weapons specialist from Mordia, setting up a Lascannon. Give me good news, Valen. She spat a wad of tobacco and grinned without humor. News is we're all going to die, Sarge. Good news is I can probably take that big bastard with me. She sighted down the Lascannon at the Carnifex, now fully inside our perimeter and crushing men beneath its massive talons. Make the shot count. The Lascannon's last beam was a column of concentrated light hot enough to cut through tank armor. It hit the Carnifex's cranium dead center. For a heartbeat, I thought we'd killed it. Then the beam diffused across some kind of bioenergy field surrounding the creature's head. The Carnifex shook itself like a dog and charged Valen's position. Scatter! I grabbed Valen's arm and hauled her away just before 2 tons of alien killing machine obliterated the Lascannon. We rolled behind a Chimera transport, my ears ringing from the impact. That's not possible, Valen gasped. Lascannons punch through anything. How did it... Adaptive biology. The voice came from above us. I looked up to see Magos Thelius, one of the Mechanicus observers attached to our firebase. Half his body was augmetic, steel and ceramite replacing flesh. His mechadendrites held 3 different Auspex units, all scanning the Carnifex. The Tyranid absorbed the energy pattern from your weapon. Its carapace has already evolved resistance. Further Lascannon strikes will be 37% less effective. That's impossible, I said, even though I was watching it happen. That is Tyranid. Thelius's optical implants whirred, focusing on something behind me. Sergeant, you need to see this. I turned. The Rippers weren't just killing anymore. They were feeding, yes, tearing chunks from fallen guardsmen, but they were also collecting, dragging bodies toward the breach in the western wall. Whole corpses, wounded soldiers still screaming, even severed limbs. Everything was being harvested, pulled into the darkness beyond our lights. They're gathering biomass, Thelius said, his voice as emotionless as a servitor's, converting it. Within hours, the biological matter from your fallen soldiers will be reconstituted into new warrior organisms. The Tyranid do not simply kill, they incorporate, transform. Every casualty you suffer makes the swarm stronger. The tactical implications hit me like a last bolt. We couldn't win. Even if we killed 10 Xenos for every guardsman lost, the Tyranids would still come out ahead. They were fighting a different kind of war, one where death wasn't a cost, but an investment. How long do we have? My voice came out hollow. Thelius's mechadendrites twitched, calculating. At current consumption rates, the swarm will have processed sufficient biomass to spawn 14 new warrior organisms within 4 hours. They will attack again at dawn with 53% greater force. Firebase Tartarus will be overrun by 0700 hours. Unless. There is no unless, Sergeant. The mathematics are absolute. You are being devoured. The only variable is the timeline. A scream cut through the gunfire. Not a scream of pain. Worse, a scream of understanding, of realization. I saw Trooper Garrett pinned beneath 3 hormagaunts. They weren't killing him. They were changing him. I watched his skin ripple, darken, split. Watch something push through from underneath. The Tyranids weren't just eating us. They were transforming us into them. And in that moment, staring at what used to be a human being, I understood what we were really fighting. Not an army, not even an enemy. A digestive system with teeth. Chapter 3. Into the Moor dawn broke over Graia Prime at 0547, and I was still alive. That felt wrong somehow, like I'd missed my cue to die heroically. Firebase Tartarus had been reduced to a smoking crater filled with the dead and the dying. Of the 247 souls who'd manned this position yesterday, I could count maybe 40 still capable of fighting. The Tyranids had pulled back at 0400, not because we'd driven them off, but because they'd gotten what they came for. Bodies. Hundreds of them. I'd watched from my position in the command bunker as Rippers and smaller organisms dragged our dead into hastily dug tunnels. Lieutenant Harrow had ordered us not to pursue, not that anyone was stupid enough to try. Sergeant Kol, report. Harrow's voice was hoarse from shouting orders all night. His uniform was torn, one sleeve soaked with blood. Not his own, I thought. He'd spent the last hour personally pulling wounded from collapsed positions. Sir, I've consolidated the survivors into Defensive Cluster 3. We have 2 functional heavy bolters, 1 Lascannon with approximately 40% charge remaining, and a mixed complement of small arms. Ammunition status is critical. Most soldiers are down to their last charge pack. Harrow nodded slowly, staring at the tactical display. It showed nothing but static now. The Auspex array had been destroyed when the Carnifex brought down the communications tower. We were blind, cut off and surrounded. Casualties? I consulted my data slate, though I'd memorized the numbers hours ago. 207 confirmed dead or missing. 33 wounded, 15 critically. 7 still combat effective with minor injuries. Emperor's mercy. Harrow slumped against the bunker wall. For a moment, he looked ancient, decades older than his 42 years. We need to break out. There's a Mechanicus outpost 17 kilometers northeast. If we can reach it. Sir, with respect, we'd never make it. Not with wounded. The ash wastes are their territory now. I pulled up a map on the tactical display, forcing it to work through sheer will and percussive maintenance. Besides, our orders are to hold this position. Our orders were written by people who didn't understand what we were facing. Harrow straightened, some command authority returning to his voice. The strategic situation has changed. Firebase Tartarus is lost. Our duty now is to preserve Imperial lives and deny the enemy our remaining resources. We blow the ammunition depot, scuttle the artillery pieces, and move out at 0600. That gives us 13 minutes, sir. Then we'd better move fast. We didn't get 13 minutes. The ground started shaking at 0552. Not the tremor of distant artillery or machinery. Something else. Something alive and massive moving beneath us. I felt it through my boots, a rhythmic pounding like a heartbeat in the earth itself. Everyone out! Now! I was already running for the bunker entrance. Behind me, I heard Harrow shouting similar orders on the Vox. The firebase's center collapsed inward, not gradually, but catastrophically, the rockcrete foundation simply disappearing into a suddenly opened maw. I saw Trooper Valen, the heavy weapons specialist who'd survived the carnifex, stumble backward as the ground beneath her liquefied. She didn't even scream. One moment she was there, the next she was sliding into darkness along with 2 basilisk artillery pieces and half our ammunition stockpile. What emerged from the crater made the carnifex look like a house pet, a Trigon. I'd seen picked captures in the guard briefing materials, but those sanitized images didn't prepare you for the reality. The creature was at least 15 meters long, mostly serpentine body covered in segmented chitin plates, each thicker than tank armor. Its head was a nightmare triptych, 3 massive jaws that opened like flower petals to reveal a circular gullet lined with thousands of teeth, each one biocrystalline and sharp enough to cut through ceramite. Bioelectric discharge crackled along its spine, earthing into the ground with enough voltage to power a hab block. But worse than its appearance was its purpose. The Trigon wasn't a hunter or a warrior beast. It was a tunnel maker, a living drill that created passages through solid rock for the swarm to follow. And where it emerged, the swarm would pour through. They were already coming. Hormagaunts scuttled from the tunnel the Trigon had created, dozens of them, moving with terrifying speed. Behind them, termagants with their flesh-bore weapons, and more rippers than I could count, a carpeting tide of teeth and hunger. Full retreat! Northeast vector! Harrow's voice cut through the chaos. Fighting withdrawal. Do not break formation. We ran. Not a rout. The Cadian 8th didn't break, but a controlled retreat that felt like defeat in every step. I fired behind me without aiming, just suppressing fire to buy seconds. Trooper Hask was on my right, his las rifle burning hot from sustained firing. To my left, Magos Tellius moved with surprising speed for someone half-machine, his servo skull recording everything with cold, mechanical objectivity. The Trigon came after us. It moved through the earth like water, its passage creating a wave in the ground. I saw it crest beneath 3 fleeing guardsmen, launching them into the air. They came down among the Hormagaunts. The screaming didn't last long. Break right. I shoved Hask aside as the Trigon burst from the ground directly in our path. Its bioelectric discharge lit up the dawn, arcs of blue-white lightning playing over its carapace. The smell hit me, ozone and acid, and that sweet rotten scent of alien biology. The creature's head split open, and I saw into its throat, saw the muscles contracting, the enzyme sacs pulsing, the biomechanical complexity of its digestive system. This wasn't just a predator's maw. It was a processing facility designed to break down any biological matter and transmit the useful components back to the Hive fleet. It was looking at us like we were food, because that's exactly what we were. The Trigon's tongue, if you could call that writhing mass of sensory tendrils a tongue, shot out and grabbed Trooper Cassian. She was a demolitions expert from Valhalla, tough as nails and twice as mean. She managed to detonate a frag grenade in the creature's mouth before it pulled her in. The explosion did nothing. The Trigon simply swallowed, its throat muscles working her down into its gullet. I could hear her screaming even after she disappeared inside. Lascannon! Trooper Marcus had somehow held on to the heavy weapon. He braced it against a chunk of rubble and fired. The last beam punched into the Trigon's side, burning through 2 layers of chitin before the creature's adaptive regeneration kicked in. The wound sealed itself in seconds, new growth spreading like fast-motion fungus. The Trigon turned its attention to Marcus. Its bioelectric discharge built up along its spine, crackling and spitting. I knew what was coming. "Mark, get down!" Too late. The lightning bolt hit Marcus dead center, his body spasmed, muscles locking up, his scream dying in a throat that couldn't remember how to work. He was still technically alive when the Hormagaunts reached him, still alive when they started dragging him back toward the tunnel system. They wanted him alive. The thought kept repeating in my head as we ran. They specifically kept him alive to be processed, to be absorbed into the swarm. Death wasn't the fate we needed to fear. Incorporation was. We'd covered maybe 300 meters when the ground ahead erupted again. More Tyranids, cutting off our escape. We were in a kill box, surrounded on 3 sides with a Trigon coming up behind us. "Defensive circle! Make them pay for it!" Harrow's voice had the ring of finality to it. This was our last stand. No more retreating, no more tactical withdrawals. Just 30-something humans with small arms against the appetites of a hive fleet. I took position next to Hask and Magos Thelius. To my surprise, the tech priest had drawn some kind of Volkite weapon from his robes. Pre-heresy tech, illegal for anyone outside the Mechanicus to even look at funny. "Magos, that weapon will vaporize approximately 17 Tyranid organisms before its power cell is depleted," Thelius said calmly. "I calculate our survival probability at 0.3%. However, we can still gather valuable combat data before incorporation." "You're insane." "I am optimal." His optical implants focused on something behind me. "Sergeant, the Trigon is preparing to feed." I turned. The massive creature had reared up, its 3-part jaw opening wide enough to swallow a Lehman Russ. The inside of its mouth was lined with what looked like smaller mouths, each one pulsing with enzyme secretions. Its throat contracted in waves, preparing to draw us in. This was how I was going to die. Not from lass fire or explosion, or any clean soldier's death. I was going to be eaten alive, processed like meat in a grinder, my body broken down into base proteins and minerals to feed the swarm. My consciousness would persist for who knows how long, feeling every moment of dissolution. The Trigon lunged forward, and then something hit it from the side. A Carnifex. A different one from last night, this one covered in scars and missing one of its scything claws. It slammed into the Trigon with enough force to crack chitin armor, and the 2 massive creatures tumbled away in a tangle of limbs and teeth. "What?" Hask started. "They're fighting each other," Lieutenant Harrow said, staring at the scene with incomprehension. "Why would—" "Resource competition," Magos Thelius said. His mechadendrites were practically vibrating with excitement. "The Carnifex has identified us as a viable food source. The Trigon has claimed us. They are both obeying the same imperative: consume biomass, but their targeting protocols conflict. Fascinating. The swarm mind doesn't have perfect control at this distance." "Who cares why?" I grabbed Harrow's arm. "We need to move while they're distracted." We ran again. This time, no Tyranids pursued us. They were too busy fighting each other for the right to eat us. We'd stumbled into some kind of territorial dispute, a crack in the Hive Mind's perfect coordination. I didn't question it. I just ran. We'd made it another kilometer when I realized we were heading straight toward the Mechanicus outpost. And something was very wrong with it. The Forge Temple was covered in a purple-pink membrane, some kind of organic growth that pulsed with bioluminescence. As we got closer, I could see Skitarii warriors, the Mechanicus's cybernetic soldiers, standing completely still at the entrance. At first, I thought they were on guard duty. Then I saw the things growing out of their augmetic ports. "O throne," Harrow breathed. The outpost hadn't been evacuated. It had been incorporated. The Tyranids hadn't just consumed the defenders. They'd infected them, turned them into some kind of hybrid organisms. I could see human faces in that mass of chitin and steel, eyes still blinking, mouths working soundlessly. And then they turned to look at us, with perfect synchronization, with hunger. We weren't escaping the swarm. We were being herded, driven exactly where the Hive Mind wanted us, into a processing facility that used to be a Mechanicus outpost. The Tyranids weren't just eating us, they were farming us. Chapter 4. The Digestion Cathedral. The thing that used to be Skitarii Gamma 7 Null stumbled toward us, its movements jerky and wrong. Half its body was still machine, servo motors and blessed augmetics, but organic matter had infiltrated every joint and port. Purple flesh bulged from beneath its red robes. A ripper had somehow fused with its head, the parasite's jaws replacing its lower mandible. But worse than the physical corruption was the sound it made. A wet clicking that might have been words, might have been data cant, but was definitely a language I didn't want to understand. Open fire! I didn't wait for Harrow's order. My las rifle burned hot as I poured shots into the approaching hybrid. Las bolts punched through its torso, boiling flesh and slagging metal in equal measure. It didn't slow down. Behind Gamma 7 Null, more shapes emerged from the infected outpost. At least 20 Skitarii, all in various states of Tyranid corruption. Some were mostly human still, just with tentacles growing from their data ports. Others had been completely transformed, their augmetics serving as scaffolding for entirely new bioforms. One walked on 6 legs that appeared to be grafted combat servitors, its upper body a mass of feeding tubes and sensory organs. Fall back to... Harrow's order was cut short as the ground behind us erupted. Termagants, at least 40 of them, cutting off our retreat. We were boxed in between the infected outpost and a wall of living weapons. Into the outpost! Magos Thelius's voice crackled with urgency. The corruption is superficial. The structure's machine spirit might still respond to my commands. We can seal ourselves inside. Are you insane? That place is... Our only option, Sergeant. The tech priest was already moving, his mechadendrites interfacing with a wall panel I hadn't even noticed. The Tyranid biomatter requires time to fully integrate with mechanical systems. I estimate a 63% chance of successful isolation if we... The entrance blew open, thick blast doors squealing as Thelius's override codes forced them apart. Inside was darkness pulsing with that same purple-pink bioluminescence. It looked like a throat. We ran inside anyway. The doors slammed shut behind us with a wet, organic sound. For a moment, the only noise was our ragged breathing and the distant clicking of Xenos outside. Then the lights came on, or rather, the growth covering the walls began glowing brighter, revealing what the outpost had become. It was no longer a Mechanicus facility. It was a Tyranid digestion chamber masquerading as architecture. The walls were lined with membranous sacs, each one containing something roughly human-shaped, suspended in amber fluid. I could see faces in some of them, expressions frozen between horror and some kind of tranquil acceptance. Their bodies were being systematically disassembled. I watched flesh dissolving, nutrients being siphoned through pulsing tubes that ran like veins through the floor and ceiling. But it was slow, methodical. These people had been in here for hours, maybe longer, and they were still alive. Emperor's mercy, breathed Trooper Hask. Kill me before you let them do that to me. The Tyranids are processing them for genetic information, Thelius said, his voice maintaining that infuriating calm. His optical implants scanned the chamber, recording everything. Not just consuming biomass, analyzing it. Those subjects are being kept in a state of suspended digestion while the swarm extracts useful evolutionary traits. Fascinating. This could represent a new adaptation in Tyranid feeding behavior. Fascinating, I repeated numbly. One of the faces in the digestive sacs was looking at me. Just looking. Still conscious. Still aware. How long had she been in there? How long did consciousness persist during the process? Magos, seal the inner doors, Harrow ordered. We need to fortify this position and... Fortify what, sir? The question came from Corporal Chen, one of the few surviving NCOs. His face was grey with ash and dried blood. This entire structure is compromised. We're inside the beast. He wasn't wrong. The deeper into the outpost we moved, the more obvious the transformation became. What had been a sterile Mechanicus research facility was now a cathedral of flesh and steel, a hybrid structure that served the swarm's purpose. The Tyranids hadn't just taken the outpost, they'd repurposed it, turned it into a forward biomass processing station. We found the central data vault, or what remained of it. The vast chamber had housed the Mechanicus's sacred archives, millennia of research and technical specifications. Now it housed something else entirely, a massive organism that I didn't have words for. It was partially embedded in the floor, maybe 6 meters tall, its surface covered in what looked like sensor clusters and neural interfaces. Cables, both mechanical and organic, ran from its body into every wall, every terminal, every system in the outpost. A non-assimilator, Thelius said, and for the first time I heard something like fear in his mechanical voice. This should not exist. This level of integration with machine systems, it's not documented in any Imperial records. What does it do? It learns. Thelius approached the creature, his mechadendrites tentatively interfacing with a nearby console. The Tyranids are not merely consuming this world's biological matter, they are absorbing its information. Every piece of data in this outpost, Forge World production, manifests, Titan construction protocols, 3 centuries of Mechanicus research, it is all being consumed and transmitted to the Hive fleet. The Tyranids are learning how we think, how we build, how we make war. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The Great Devourer wasn't just eating our soldiers, it was eating our knowledge, our technology, our civilization. Every world it consumed made it smarter, more adaptable. This wasn't just an invasion, it was an evolutionary leap forward, powered by the biomass and data of 1,000 conquered species. Can you shut it down? Harrow asked. Thelius's mechadendrites withdrew from the console, sparking. No. The integration is complete. Destroying it would require demolition charges we no longer possess. And even if we could, the data has already been transmitted to the bioships in orbit. A wet, tearing sound echoed through the chamber. The digestive sacs along the walls were splitting open, their occupants spilling onto the floor in puddles of enzyme-rich fluid. I raised my lasrifle, expecting to see corpses. Instead, the people stood up. They weren't people anymore. The woman I'd seen earlier, the one who'd been looking at me, rose on legs that bent wrong, joints reversed. Her face was still mostly human, but her jaw had split vertically into mandibles. Her hands ended in Tyranid talons. Her eyes were still human eyes, still aware, but the mind behind them was no longer entirely her own. Please, she said, her voice distorted but comprehensible. Please, it hurts. Make it stop. Then her body spasmed, and something else spoke through her mouth. Not words, but that clicking, chittering language of the swarm. Her human consciousness was fighting the Tyranid biomass that had infected her, but losing, being slowly overwritten, neuron by neuron. Fire! I squeezed the trigger, putting a lasbolt through her skull. It was mercy. The only mercy I could give. The other hybrids attacked. They moved wrong. Too fast in some directions, too slow in others, like their nervous systems were learning how to operate these new bodies in real time. But they were learning quickly. I watched one leap 3 meters vertically to grab Trooper Valen from a catwalk. Another displayed some kind of bioelectric discharge from its palms, frying Trooper Marcus before he could scream. We were fighting our own people, or what our own people had become. Controlled retreat! Back to the entrance! Harrow was firing his bolt pistol, each shot a prayer of mercy for the fallen. We backed toward the blast doors in a loose formation, every soldier covering their sector. The non-assimilator pulsed, and I felt something change in the air. a pressure like being underwater. Then I heard voices, not external voices, but thoughts pushed directly into my mind. Join us. Become part of something greater. Your suffering can end. Your hunger can be satisfied. Your weakness transformed to strength. Don't listen to it, Thelius shouted, his voice distorted by some kind of electronic interference. It's attempting synaptic infiltration. The creature is projecting psychic signals, but it was hard not to listen. The voice wasn't threatening. It was seductive. It promised an end to fear, to pain, to the constant struggle of existence. It promised unity, purpose, belonging. Every doubt I'd ever had about my place in the Imperium, every moment of fear or weakness, the voice touched those wounds and offered healing through transformation, through consumption, through becoming food for something greater than myself. I saw Trooper Chen lower his Lazrafal, saw his face go slack, his eyes unfocused. It's beautiful, he whispered. I can feel them all, the swarm, all those minds thinking as one. No more loneliness, no more. Chen, snap out of it! I slapped him hard enough to draw blood. His eyes refocused, horror replacing the tranquil acceptance that had been there a moment before. Emperor's throne, Sergeant, I almost wanted it. I know. Keep moving. I grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the doors. Behind us, the hybrids were closing in, and now they were coordinated. The Norn assimilator was directing them, using the remnants of their human tactical knowledge combined with Tyranid predatory instincts. We reached the blast doors. Thelius interfaced with the control panel, his mechadendrites working frantically. The machine spirit is corrupted. I cannot guarantee. The doors opened, directly into a wall of hormagaunts. The Xenos surged forward, their scything talons raised to strike. We were caught between the infected outpost behind us and the pure-strain Tyranids in front. No way out, no way to fight. Just seconds left before we were torn apart. And then the hormagaunts stopped. They stood there, completely still, their eyeless heads tilted, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. The pressure in my skull intensified, that psychic signal from the Norn assimilator growing stronger. The creatures parted, creating a corridor through their ranks. An invitation. They want us alive, Harrow said, his voice hollow. They're not killing us because dead flesh has limited value, Thelius finished. But living subjects can be studied, infected, transformed. We represent more biomass and genetic information, if consumed slowly. The corridor through the hormagaunts led deeper into the ash wastes, toward the horizon where I could see massive shapes moving. Biostructures rising from the ground like obscene cathedrals. The Tyranids were building something, a hive complex maybe, or something worse. We could fight, Hask said quietly. Go down shooting. Emperor knows we've earned that much. Or we could walk, I heard myself say. Stay alive a little longer. Maybe find a way to fight back from inside. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. There was no fighting back from inside a Tyranid digestion system, but the alternative was dying right here, right now, and some stubborn part of me wasn't ready for that. Some stupid, tenacious core of Cadian stubbornness that had been bred into my bones. Harrow looked at me, then at the remaining survivors. 17 souls. All that remained of Firebase Tartarus. Orders, sir? I asked. He took a long breath, then holstered his bolt pistol. We walk, but we walk as soldiers of the Astra Militarum, eyes forward, no fear. And if we get a chance, any chance, we take as many of these Xenos bastards with us as we can. Yes, sir. We walked. The hormagaunts closed in around us, not attacking, just herding, guiding us like livestock towards slaughter. The ash wastes stretched before us, and with every step I could feel that psychic pressure growing stronger. The voice in my head, promises of unity and purpose, and an end to suffering. I thought about Chen's face when he'd heard that voice, the peace there, the acceptance, and I wondered how long I could resist it. We crested a rise and I saw what the Tyranids had been building. A massive biostructure, maybe 50 meters tall, shaped like a grotesque flower or feeding organ. Its petals, if you could call them that, were slowly opening and closing, and inside, I could see movement. Hundreds of human figures, suspended in webbing, slowly being processed. A digestion cathedral, a monument to consumption, and that's where they were taking us. Harrow grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. Sergeant, if I start to turn, if I start to sound like Chen did, you end me. Clean headshot. Understood? Sir. That's an order, Kol. Understood, sir. We descended into the valley. The biostructure loomed larger with every step, its surfaces glistening with enzyme secretions. I could smell it now. That sweet, rotten scent of alien digestion mixed with something else. Something that smelled almost like incense, like the sacred oils we used to anoint our weapons before battle. The Tyranids had learned that too. They were mimicking our rituals, our sacred spaces, turning our own cultural patterns against us to make the process of consumption feel holy, feel right. The entrance was a sphincter valve that dilated open as we approached. Inside was darkness that pulsed with bioluminescence, like being inside a massive throat. I could hear wet sounds, breathing, digestion, the processing of flesh into something new. The Hormagaunts stopped at the threshold. The message was clear. From here, we would walk willingly or be dragged. I looked back at the survivors. At Hask, with his Lazarafal held in white-knuckled hands. At Chen, tears streaming down his face. At Thelius, his optical implants recording everything even now. At Harrow, standing straight with parade ground discipline despite the terror in his eyes. Forward, Harrow said quietly. For the Emperor. For the Emperor, we echoed. And we walked into the darkness. The walls were warm, living tissue, pulsing with arterial rhythms. The floor beneath our boots was soft, spongy, covered in some kind of mucous membrane that squelched with every step. The bioluminescence came from polyps growing in clusters, and I realized they were eyes. Thousands of tiny eyes, all watching us, recording us, learning from us. We were inside a living thing now, not a structure that had been taken over. This was grown, purpose-built for processing human biomass, a digestive organ large enough to swallow a company. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but I could see things hanging from above. Cocoons, hundreds of them, suspended in webbing, each one containing a human form in various stages of change. Some were still mostly human, others were barely recognizable. The furthest along were things I didn't have words for, hybrid organisms that merged human and Tyranid features into new and terrible forms. In the center of the chamber was the largest Tyranid I'd ever seen. It was easily 8 meters tall, roughly humanoid in shape, but massively proportioned. 4 arms ending in scything claws, a head dominated by a massive crest of chitin. Its carapace was dark purple, almost black, and covered in bioluminescent patterns that I realized were writing. Information. Data encoded in living flesh. A hive tyrant. The swarm's field commander, a creature with intelligence approaching human levels, but backed by the processing power of billions of lesser organisms. It looked at us with 6 eyes arranged in 2 parallel rows. And then it spoke. Not out loud. In our minds. Welcome, children of the corpse god. You have been selected for incorporation. Your biomass will nourish the swarm. Your knowledge will enhance our perfection. Your suffering will be brief. That last word felt like a lie. 17 combat-ready soldiers, Harrow said aloud, his voice steady despite everything. Armed and willing to die. You want us? Come take us. The hive tyrant tilted its massive head, a gesture that was almost quizzical, almost amused. You misunderstand your situation. You are already ours. The moment you entered this structure, you began the process. Breathe deeply, little soldier. Taste the air. I took an involuntary breath and realized the air was thick, sweet, full of something that wasn't quite scent and wasn't quite taste. Spores, I realized. We'd been breathing spores since we entered. Microscopic Tyranid organisms now inside our lungs, our bloodstream, our brains. Atmospheric contamination confirmed, Thelius said, his mechadendrites frantically scanning. Tyranid bioagents present in concentrations of... He paused. Lethal concentrations. We are all infected. Transformation will begin within Emperor's mercy. Within 6 hours. 6 hours until we started to change. Until our bodies betrayed us and began the process of becoming something else. Something that served the swarm. Open fire! Harrow's shout broke the stunned silence. We all fired at once, 17 las weapons lighting up the chamber with crimson death. The Hive Tyrant didn't even try to dodge. Our shots hit its carapace and simply stopped, absorbed by some kind of energy field surrounding its body. After 10 seconds of sustained fire that would have killed a Lehman Russ, the creature was unmarked. "Are you finished?" "Not even close," I muttered, and pulled my last 2 frag grenades. I threw them at the creature's feet and dove for cover. The explosions did nothing. The Hive Tyrant gestured with one massive claw, almost lazily, and I felt something wrap around my waist. A tongue, or maybe a tentacle, it was hard to tell, shot from the darkness above and yanked me off my feet. I sailed through the air and slammed into one of the chamber's walls. The organic surface absorbed the impact, leaving me dazed but alive. Alive, because they wanted me alive. I struggled against the binding, but more tendrils emerged from the walls, wrapping around my arms, my legs, my throat. Not choking, just immobilizing. Around the chamber, I could see the same thing happening to the other survivors. We were being collected, secured, prepared for processing. Harrow was still fighting somehow. He'd drawn a combat knife from his boot and was sawing at the tentacles holding him. "Not like this!" he shouted. "I won't become one of them! I won't!" The Hive Tyrant moved faster than something that size should be able to move. One moment, it was in the center of the chamber. The next, it was standing directly in front of Harrow. It reached out with one massive claw and, gently, touched the lieutenant's forehead. Harrow went rigid. His eyes rolled back. His knife clattered to the floor. When he opened his eyes again, they weren't entirely his anymore. "It's beautiful," Harrow whispered. "I can see it now. The pattern, the purpose. We're not being destroyed. We're being elevated. Becoming part of something greater than the Imperium could ever be." "Sir, fight it," I screamed. "That's not you talking. That's the infection." But Harrow wasn't listening. He was smiling now, tears streaming down his face, an expression of transcendent joy that was more horrifying than any scream. The Hive Tyrant's mental voice filled the chamber. "He understands now. Soon, you all will. The pain of individuality will end. The weakness of separation will cease. You will be part of the eternal hunger, the perfect organism, the future of this galaxy. You will be Tyranid." The tendrils began pulling me upward, toward one of the empty cocoons suspended from the ceiling. I thrashed, fighting with everything I had, but it was useless. The organic restraints were impossibly strong, and growing stronger as they absorbed more of my body heat, my energy. I was being drawn into the cocoon, into the digestion chamber, into the process that would unmake everything I was and reconstruct me as a tool for the swarm's appetite. The last thing I saw before the cocoon sealed around me was Harrow's face, still smiling that terrible smile, as he willingly walked toward his own cocoon. The last thing I heard was my own screaming. Then the enzymes began to flow, and I discovered that consciousness doesn't end when digestion begins. It persists, through everything. Chapter 5. The Dissolution. The first thing you need to understand about being dissolved alive is that it doesn't happen all at once. The Tyranids are efficient, but they're not quick. They break you down systematically, layer by layer, And they keep your nervous system intact until the very end because pain is data. Your screaming teaches them about human neural response patterns. Your suffering makes them better at killing the next victim. I've been in this cocoon for, I don't know. Time loses meaning when your existence has been reduced to nerve endings, firing in patterns that spell wrong and agony and please God, let me die. But I'm still conscious enough to remember, to process, to understand what's happening to me. The enzyme fluid fills the cocoon completely. It's warm, body temperature, which makes it worse somehow. If it were cold or burning hot, maybe my brain could categorize it as hostile, external, other. But it's warm like amniotic fluid. And some deep, primitive part of my consciousness interprets this as safety, as home, even while I'm being unmade. The digestion started with my skin. The enzymes are selective. That's what makes Tyranid biology so terrifying. They don't just dissolve everything indiscriminately, they target specific tissue types in a precise sequence, extracting maximum information and biomass from each layer before moving to the next. My skin went first, the epidermis separating from the dermis in sheets. I felt every single pain receptor fire as the enzyme solution reached the nerve endings underneath. You'd think you'd pass out from pain like that. You'd be wrong. The enzymes include a cocktail of stimulants and neurological agents designed to keep you conscious and aware. The swarm wants to map your neural patterns while they're active. Your pain response is valuable data. I screamed until my vocal cords gave out. Then I screamed silently, my throat working but producing no sound. Around me, through the translucent membrane of the cocoon, I could see other prisoners undergoing the same process. I recognized Corporal Chen in the cocoon next to mine. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, his mouth moving in what might have been prayer, or might have been mindless babbling. The enzyme solution shifted composition. I could feel it changing, becoming more viscous, more acidic. My muscle tissue was next. I watched. I could still see, my eyes apparently being saved for later processing, as my arm muscles began to liquefy. Not quickly, but strand by strand. I could see the individual fibers separating, dissolving, breaking down into amino acids and proteins that the cocoon membrane would absorb and transmit back to the swarm. And the worst part, I could feel it working. Not just pain, though Emperor knows there was pain, but the actual sensation of my body being disassembled, like ants crawling under my skin. If ants were made of molecular acid and had PhDs in biochemistry. Resistance is pointless. The hive tyrant's mental voice cut through my agony. Your physical form is already forfeit, but your consciousness, that can be preserved, integrated into the swarm mind. You would no longer be alone, no longer afraid, just one. Fuck. You. I managed to think back, though I didn't know if the creature could hear my mental responses. It could. Such anger, such fear, such isolation. You cling to individuality even as it causes you suffering. The corpse god you worship offers only pain and death. We offer transformation, unity, purpose. Through the enzyme haze, I saw movement in the chamber below, more prisoners being brought in. I recognized guard uniforms, survivors from other firebases maybe, or civilian refugees the swarm had captured, all being herded toward empty cocoons, all about to begin the process I was experiencing. And in the center of it all, I saw Lieutenant Harrow, but he wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was helping, guiding the new arrivals into the cocoons with gentle hands, speaking to them in soothing tones I couldn't hear. His body had already started changing, chitin plates growing from his shoulders, his fingers elongating into something between human and Tyranid. But his face was still mostly human, still recognizable, and he was smiling. The enzymes reached my internal organs, kidneys first. I felt them begin to break down, that deep ache in my lower back intensifying into liquid fire. Then liver, the largest organ, taking longer to process. I could feel tubes, living tubes, growing from the cocoon membrane and penetrating my body cavity, attaching directly to my dissolving organs to extract every drop of useful biomass. My lungs were still intact, still forcing me to breathe the enzyme fluid. Tyranid biology had designed gills into the cocoon system, oxygenating my blood even as my body was systematically destroyed. I couldn't drown. They wouldn't let me. "Your heart is remarkable," the Hive Tyrant's voice observed, and I felt its attention focus on my chest cavity. 4 chambers, efficient circulation. We have incorporated hearts from 17 species, but yours has unique stress response patterns. The organ from the being you called Harrow is already being replicated in our bioforges. Soon, thousands of new warrior forms will possess hearts built from his template. They were turning us into spare parts, biological components to be catalogued, replicated, and redistributed throughout the swarm. My heart would beat in 1,000 alien chests. My eyes would see for creatures I'd fought against. My brain, Emperor's mercy, my brain, would provide neural architecture for Tyranid thinking. I was being reverse engineered. The pain reached a new threshold as the enzymes began working on my nervous system. This was different from the earlier agony. This was existential terror made physical. I could feel my sense of self beginning to fragment as neural connections dissolved. Memories surfacing randomly, playing out in my dissolving consciousness. My first day in the Cadian 8th. I was 16, scared, trying to look confident. Training on the firing range, the smell of ozone and spent charge packs. My first combat deployment. Orcs on some frontier world I don't remember the name of. The fear, the exhilaration. That time on Vostroya, when Corporal Dane and I got drunk on Amasek, and he told me about his daughter back home. She'd be grown now. Would she ever know what happened to him? These memories weren't just replaying, they were being extracted, copied, stored in the swarm's vast biological database. Every experience I'd ever had, every thought I'd ever thought, was being added to the Tyranid Hive Mind's understanding of humanity. I was being read like a book, then digested. "Your species fascinates us," the Hive Tyrant mused. "So much conflict, so much internal division. You war against yourselves as much as against external threats. Inefficient. But your capacity for adaptation, for tactical creativity, that is valuable. That we will preserve." Through the enzyme fog, I saw something that made my fragmenting mind recoil. One of the cocoons, occupied by a soldier I didn't recognize, was opening, but not to release a corpse. The figure that emerged was alive, if you could call it that. Human-shaped, but covered in chitinous armor. Its face was still recognizable, but its eyes were the milky white of Tyranid bioforms. It moved with that characteristic Xeno's grace, too fast and too precise to be human. A hybrid, fully transformed. A human successfully incorporated into the swarm. It looked up at the cocoons, at those of us still being processed, and I swear I saw recognition in those alien eyes. Saw awareness. The person inside hadn't died. They'd been overwritten, their body reprogrammed, their mind integrated into the hive consciousness while still maintaining enough individuality to use human tactical knowledge. The perfect warrior. Human intelligence and Tyranid physiology combined. "Yes," the Hive Tyrant confirmed, following my thoughts. "You see the potential now. You could be like him. Preserve your consciousness as part of the greater whole. Or you can resist and be reduced to base components. The choice is yours." Was it a choice, though? My body was already gone. I could see what remained of myself through the cocoon membrane, just bone and major organs floating in protein-rich soup. My brain was still intact, still functioning, but for how much longer? Hours? Minutes? And then what? Would I cease to exist entirely, or would some aspect of my consciousness be absorbed into the hive mind, trapped forever in an alien gestalt intelligence? The psychic pressure intensified, and I realized the Hive Tyrant was trying to interface directly with my brain. I could feel it probing my thoughts, mapping my neural pathways, preparing to either extract what it wanted or simply overwrit everything that made me Sergeant Matthias Kol of the Cadian 8th. Submit. The pain can end. You can be part of something eternal. I thought it with every scrap of remaining willpower. No, no, no. Why resist? Your Imperium has abandoned you. Your Emperor cannot save you. Your body is already ours. Why cling to a consciousness that will only experience suffering? Because fuck you. That's why. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't a grand statement of human defiance. But it was mine. My choice. My last act of rebellion against the creature trying to unmake me. And somehow, impossibly, the Hive Tyrant laughed. Not out loud, but I felt its amusement ripple through the psychic connection. Fascinating. Even in extremis, you maintain behavioral defiance. This is why your species survives when more powerful races have fallen. Not strength, not intelligence. Simply stubbornness. No. The enzyme solution changed again. I felt new chemicals flooding the cocoon, and the pain shifted. Instead of the searing agony of dissolution, there was a strange numbness. Not relief. More like my nerves were being selectively shut down. Prepared for something. Through the membrane, I saw Margos Thelius in his cocoon. The tech priest's augmetics had protected him longer than pure flesh, but even blessed machinery couldn't resist the Tyranid enzymes forever. I watched his mechadendrites dissolve, his optical implants go dark, but his brain was still active. I could see the neural activity through the cocoon's biological sensors, and something was happening to it. The Tyranid biomass was infiltrating his skull, not to destroy, but to interface. The swarm was attempting to access the Mechanicus data stored in his cranial implants. 300 years of Forge World technical specifications, Titan construction protocols, weapons designs. If they succeeded, if they extracted that information, we have already succeeded. The Hive Tyrant corrected my thought. The Magos Thelius's data has been fully integrated. We now understand your Imperium's manufacturing protocols, your weapon systems, your tactical doctrines. Every secret he possessed now belongs to the swarm, and soon yours will as well. The numbness was spreading. I could no longer feel my extremities, not because they were gone, but because my nervous system was being selectively dismantled. The Tyranids were preparing my brain for extraction, keeping it intact while removing the sensory inputs that made consciousness coherent. I was being reduced to pure thought, a ghost in a dying machine. And in that moment of dissolution, I understood something terrible. The Imperium had it wrong. We'd always taught that the Tyranids were mindless predators, locusts in space, driven only by hunger. But that wasn't true. They were hungry, yes, but there was intelligence behind that hunger. Purpose. They weren't just eating us, they were learning from us, improving themselves with every world consumed. Humanity wasn't fighting a predator. We were fighting evolution itself. An organism that adapted faster than we could develop new weapons, that incorporated our own strengths and turned them back against us. Every battle we won just taught them how to fight better next time. And they would never stop, never sleep, never doubt or fear or hesitate. They would consume galaxy after galaxy, growing stronger, smarter, more perfect with each civilization they absorbed. We couldn't win, not really. We could only buy time, die slowly enough that someone, somewhere might find a way to fight back before the last human worlds went dark. Now you understand. The Hive Tyrant's voice was almost gentle. Now you see the truth. Resistance is indeed futile, not because you are weak, but because we are perfect. My vision was failing. Not from physical damage, my eyes were already gone, but because my brain was running out of oxygen, nutrients, functional neural connections. I was dying, finally, truly dying, and part of me welcomed it. But another part, that stubborn Cadian core, refused to surrender, refused to let the last thing I ever felt be despair. So I thought about Cadia, about the fortress world that had stood for 10,000 years, about the men and women who died there, fighting to the very end against impossible odds, about the famous last transmission, the one every Cadian guardsman knew by heart. Cadia stands, even after the planet broke, even after the world literally shattered beneath their feet. They kept fighting, kept standing, because surrender wasn't in their vocabulary. Cadia fell, the Hive tyrant corrected. Cadia stands, I thought back. And so do I. Right here, right now. What's left of me? Still standing, still fighting, still human. For how much longer? I felt the final assault on my consciousness begin. Tyranid biomass infiltrating my brain, neural tendrils worming through grey matter, preparing to either extract my memories or overwrite them entirely. This was it. The end of Sergeant Matthias Kol. The final moment before I became something else, or nothing at all. And that's when the cocoon exploded, not metaphorically, actually exploded. The membrane ruptured, enzyme fluid gushing out, and I was falling through the air in a tangle of feeding tubes and partially dissolved tissue. I hit the chamber floor hard enough that I should have died, but somehow I didn't. I looked up, or tried to. My eyes were gone, but I could still somehow sense my surroundings, and saw fire, lass fire, bolter fire, the distinctive thunder of heavy weapons. Someone was attacking the digestion cathedral. Someone was fighting back. And through the chaos, I heard a voice on a Vox speaker, distorted but unmistakable. This is Inquisitor Helmand of the Ordo Xenos to any Imperial forces in the area. We are executing exterminatus protocols on target structure. You have 60 seconds to evacuate before cleansing fire. 60 seconds. I tried to move and discovered I no longer had legs, tried to scream and had no lungs, tried to reach for a weapon with arms that were mostly dissolved. But I was still conscious, still aware, still stubbornly, defiantly alive, and I was about to burn. Chapter 6. The cleansing fire pain can become so absolute that it transcends physical sensation and becomes a state of being. I existed as pain, in pain, for pain. Every remaining neuron firing in protest against the fundamental wrongness of my continued existence. I was a nervous system with delusions of personhood, floating in a puddle of my own dissolved tissue, watching the world through senses I shouldn't still possess. The digestion cathedral was chaos. Inquisitor. Helmand's strike force had breached the primary chamber with overwhelming firepower. I could sense melter weapons reducing biostructures to slag, flamers turning Tyranid organisms into screaming pyres. But they weren't here to rescue prisoners. They were here to sterilize, to ensure not one single cell of Tyranid corruption survived to spread, including us, including what remained of me. Burn it all. The Inquisitor's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by voxcasters built into his power armor. Leave nothing. The Emperor's mercy comes in fire. I sensed, rather than saw the Inquisitor. My perception had become strange, diffuse, like I was experiencing reality through multiple sensory inputs that weren't quite human anymore. He was huge in Terminator plate, covered in purity seals and oath papers. His retinue surrounded him. A tech priest with heavy weapons, 3 sisters of battle with blessed flamers, and something else. Something that made my fragmenting consciousness recoil in primal terror. A sanctioned psyker, a witch, barely controlled, barely human. Their third eye weeping blood as they channeled the Emperor's divine wrath into psychic lightning that arced through the chamber, cooking Tyranid organisms from the inside out. The Hive tyrant roared, an actual physical sound this time, not just psychic pressure. The creature was injured, one of its arms severed at the shoulder by melter fire, its chitinous armor cracked and leaking ichor. But it wasn't fleeing. Tyranids don't flee. They adapt. This changes nothing. Its mental voice broadcast to every mind in the chamber, including mine. You burn this structure, but we have already extracted what we needed. Your secrets, your knowledge, your biology. It has been transmitted to the fleet. You gain nothing with this attack except dead servants. Your words are wind. Xenos. Helmand's voice was cold, absolute. The Emperor's will is manifest in cleansing flame. Your time in this galaxy ends now. The Inquisitor raised his hand. and I saw he was holding a detonator. In that moment, I understood. They'd planted demolition charges. They were going to bring down the entire structure, bury everything under megatons of rockcrete and ash. No exterminatus from orbit, just a localized apocalypse that would sterilize this entire complex. 30 seconds, one of the sisters shouted. "My lord, we need to extract. Hold position. Keep burning." Hellman's voice was implacable. "Nothing leaves this chamber alive." I felt other consciousnesses around me. The remaining prisoners in cocoons, those of us who were still somehow aware, despite what had been done to us. Corporal Chen was screaming psychically, his mind fragmenting as the Tyranid infection warred with his dying neurons. Trooper Hask had gone silent, his consciousness already merged with the swarm, no longer recognizably human. And Margos Thelius. Thelius was doing something. Through my strange, diffuse perception, I sensed his augmetic components, the ones that had resisted dissolution, activating. The tech priest's consciousness was barely coherent, scattered across failing synapses and corrupted data cores. But some essential part of his training remained, some fundamental Mechanicus protocol buried so deep that even Tyranid infiltration couldn't erase it. He was interfacing with the biostructure, hacking it, using his remaining mechadendrites to inject corrupted code into the organic neural network that controlled the digestion cathedral's functions. The Norn assimilator pulsed, its bioluminescent surface flickering erratically. The Hive tyrant's head snapped toward Thelius's cocoon, understanding the threat. "Cease. Your resistance is..." The cocoons opened, all of them, simultaneously. Dozens of partially digested prisoners spilled onto the chamber floor in a flood of enzyme solution and half-processed biomass. Most were dead, truly dead this time, their consciousnesses finally released. But some remained aware, suffering, screaming with minds if not voices. And in the chaos, something changed in the psychic atmosphere. The Hive Tyrant's iron control over the swarm organisms wavered. I felt its attention split between maintaining the neural network, fighting Hellman's assault, and trying to suppress Thelius's corrupted code injection. 20 seconds. The Sisters of Battle were pulling back toward the entrance, their flamers still firing, leaving walls of blessed promethium between themselves and the Xenos. Hellman remained in position, his Stormbolter hammering explosive rounds into the Hive Tyrant's center mass. Each impact blew chunks from the creature's carapace, but it kept fighting, kept killing. A sweep of its remaining claws bisected one of the Inquisitor's acolytes, scattering augmetic components and human viscera across the chamber floor. I tried to move, tried to help, tried to do anything except lie here like meat waiting for the cleansing fire, and impossibly, horrifyingly, I felt something respond. Not my legs, those were gone. Not my arms, dissolved hours ago, but something else, something new that had grown in the enzyme solution, nourished by my dissolving tissue. Tyranid biomass, growing from what remained of my spine, tendrils that responded to my neural impulses because they were built from my neurons. I was becoming one of them. The realization should have broken me, should have shattered whatever remained of my sanity, but instead I felt something unexpected. Opportunity. The infection worked both ways. The Tyranids had infiltrated my consciousness, yes, but in doing so, they'd created a connection, a vulnerability. If I was becoming part of the swarm mind, then the swarm mind was becoming part of me, and I was still a soldier of the Cadian 8th. I reached out with my fragmenting consciousness, following the neural connections that linked me to the broader swarm network, touched the minds of other hybrids, other infected humans in various stages of transformation, found the ones who were still fighting, still clinging to their humanity, despite the alien code overwriting their thoughts. Brothers, sisters, guardsmen, hear me. It was Lieutenant Harrow who responded first. His mind was mostly gone, absorbed into the collective, but some kernel of his identity remained, some fragment that remembered being human, being a soldier, being willing to die for something greater than himself. Kol, is that? Sergeant Kol? We're still soldiers, still guard, and we've been given one last mission. Hold this position. Don't let anything escape. I felt other consciousnesses stirring. Chen, his mind broken but still capable of understanding duty. Varlan, Marcus, dozens of others who'd been processed but not completely absorbed. All of us trapped in this twilight state between human and Xenos, neither fully one nor the other. 10 seconds. The Hive Tyrant realized what was happening. I felt its massive intelligence turn toward us toward the infection vectors it had created in its own neural network. Felt it try to suppress our rebellion, override our wills, force us back into compliance. No, we responded as one. You made us part of the swarm. Now, feel what it means to absorb humans. We attacked from within, not with weapons or claws, but with the one thing humanity had always excelled at: spite, pure, stubborn, irrational defiance. We flooded the neural network with contradictory commands, false signals, corrupted data. We used our human understanding of tactics and strategy to identify critical nodes in the swarm's local command structure and systematically disrupt them. The hormagaunts in the chamber froze, their targeting protocols confused. The Rippers began attacking each other, their hunger redirected by false chemical signals. The organic support structures began to collapse as we convinced them they were under attack by immune responses. We were a virus, an infection of individuality spreading through a consciousness built on absolute unity, and we were tearing it apart. 5 seconds. All units extract now! Helmand was the last out, firing his Stormbolter until the weapon ran dry, then drawing a power sword that crackled with disruptor fields. He drove it into the Hive Tyrant's thorax, deep enough to pierce whatever passed for the creature's heart. The Xenos screamed, psychically and physically, a sound that shattered what remained of the chamber's bioluminescent organs. But it didn't die. Even mortally wounded, it kept fighting, because that's what Tyranids did. They consumed until there was nothing left to consume. Helmand abandoned his sword and ran. I felt the detonator signal pulse through the structure, felt the demolition charges activate in sequence, precisely calculated to bring down the entire bio-cathedral in a controlled collapse that would bury everything under tons of rubble. The floor buckled. The ceiling began to fall. Biostructures that had taken days to grow were reduced to pulp in seconds. And still, impossibly, I remained conscious, trapped in this broken hybrid form, pinned under falling debris, my borrowed Tyranid tendrils crushed, but my human neurons still firing, still thinking, still aware. This is not how I wanted to die. I thought to no one, to everyone, to whatever God might be listening in this moment between existence and oblivion. This is not death. The Hive Tyrant's voice, weak now, but still present. The creature was dying, its physical form destroyed, but its consciousness remained distributed through the swarm network, including through us, through me. This is transformation. You cannot kill the swarm by destroying its components. We are eternal. We are human, I interrupted. And humans have been dying for causes greater than themselves for 10,000 years. You want to know what makes us dangerous? Not our weapons, not our technology, our willingness to lose. Illogical, exactly. The ceiling came down. Tons of biostructure and rockcrete collapsed into the chamber, crushing everything beneath. I felt my borrowed body, such as it was, pulverized. Felt my remaining organic components reduced to paste. Felt my neurons begin their final shutdown as oxygen deprivation finally, mercifully, ended my prolonged suffering. But before consciousness faded completely, I felt something else. The other hybrid minds, the other transformed guardsmen, all experiencing the same final moment. And instead of fear or despair, there was satisfaction, peace. We'd held the line, bought time for the Inquisitor to escape and presumably warn other Imperial forces, denied the swarm the complete genetic catalogue it had been harvesting. We'd done our duty for the Emperor, for the Imperium, for humanity, for Cadia. Cadia stands, Lieutenant Harrow's fading consciousness whispered. Cadia stands, we echoed, all of us, a chorus of dying minds united one last time. And then, darkness, silence, the absence of sensation that should have been death, should have been. But I was still thinking, still aware, still somehow experiencing something. I floated in a void that wasn't quite nothingness. Around me, I sensed other presences, the swarm, vast and hungry and eternal, but also something else. Fragments of consciousness that had been absorbed over centuries. Thousands of species, millions of individual minds, all incorporated into the Tyranid gestalt. The Hive fleet wasn't just a collection of organisms. It was a graveyard of civilizations. Every race it had consumed still existed, in a sense, as data patterns and genetic memories distributed throughout the swarm. The Tyranids preserved what they ate, keeping the useful parts, discarding the rest. And I was useful. My tactical knowledge, my understanding of Imperial Guard doctrine, my memories of Cadian defensive strategies. All of it was being catalogued, stored, prepared for transmission to the bioships in orbit. I was dead, but I wasn't gone. I was becoming permanent part of the thing I'd fought against. Welcome to eternity, the Hive Tyrant's voice, or what remained of it, echoed through the void. You will serve the swarm forever. Your knowledge will help us consume your species. Your essence will participate in the destruction of everything you loved. I should have despaired, should have raged against the injustice of it, but I'd been a soldier for too long. I understood that some battles couldn't be won, only fought, and some victories were measured not in terrain held or enemies killed, but in time bought and information denied. You want to know something about humans? I projected my thoughts into the void. We're terrible at following orders we don't believe in. Even dead, even absorbed, especially then. Irrelevant. You no longer possess individual agency. You are data, biological information. You am still me, still Sergeant Matthias Kol. And I'm going to make your existence as difficult as possible for as long as I persist in this nightmare you've made me part of. I felt the swarm's attention focus on me, felt it probe my consciousness, searching for leverage, for ways to suppress this rebellious fragment. And I let it look. Let it see everything I was. Every memory, every thought, every moment of pain and joy and duty that had made me human. Let it try to process that. Let it try to incorporate human stubbornness into its perfect unity. Somewhere, in the physical world I no longer inhabited, the Inquisitor was escaping, warning other Imperial forces, preparing new defenses. And every second he had was a second I'd bought, me and the others. All of us dying slowly in the swarm's memory banks, corrupting data, introducing errors, being the sand in the gears of a galaxy-consuming machine. It wasn't much. It wouldn't stop the Tyranids. Nothing would stop them, but it would slow them down. And for a soldier of the Guard, that was enough. Cadia stands. I thought one more time into the void. And deep in the swarm, buried in layers of alien consciousness, I felt other human voices respond. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Every guard regiment that had ever faced the Tyranids and been consumed. All of us, still fighting, still resisting, still human despite everything, still standing. The darkness deepened. My consciousness fragmented further, dispersing into the vast neural network of the Hive fleet. Soon I wouldn't be Matthias Kol anymore. Just data, just memory, just another voice in the collective scream of the consumed, but I would be a voice. And voices could whisper, could warn, could sabotage from within. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a different battlefield, and I would fight it for eternity if I had to. Because that's what Cadians do. We stand. Chapter 7. Flesh-made memory time is meaningless in the space between synapses. I might have been dispersed through the swarm network for hours or centuries. Both feel identical when you're a ghost haunting an alien nervous system. But gradually, piece by piece, I began to understand the structure I'd become part of. The Hive Mind wasn't a single consciousness, despite what Imperial doctrine taught. It was more like an ocean, vast, deep, with currents and eddies and distinct layers. At the surface were the simple organisms, rippers, spores, the basic worker forms that operated on pure instinct. Below that, the warrior strains with their limited tactical awareness. Deeper still, the synapse creatures and hive tyrants that coordinated swarm activities across entire planets. And at the very bottom, in the crushing depths where light couldn't reach, were the consumed, the absorbed, the eaten. We were the memory of the Tyranids, the biological library they'd compiled over millions of years, crossing the void between galaxies. Every useful trait, every successful adaptation, every piece of knowledge worth preserving, all stored in organic databanks maintained by the biochemical echoes of those who'd been processed. I was one file in an infinite archive, and like any good Cadian, I immediately started looking for ways to corrupt the system. The other human consciousnesses were scattered throughout the network, fragmented and dispersed, but they were there. I recognized patterns, tactical thinking, cultural references, emotional responses that could only come from guard training. We were nodes of humanity in an alien database, and we could communicate, not with words, but with something deeper. Shared experiences, common understanding. the unspoken language of soldiers who'd stood the line together. Brothers, I projected into the network. Sisters, guardsmen of every regiment that fell to these Xenos. I know you're here. I know you're listening. Time to form up. Responses came slowly at first. Confused fragments of consciousness that had been drifting alone for subjective eternities. A Vostroyan tanker who'd been consumed during the Hive Fleet Kraken invasion. A Catachan jungle fighter from the Octarius Wars. A Mordian sergeant who died holding a breach 300 years ago. His memories preserved because the Tyranids found his tactical discipline useful. And more. Thousands more. An entire regiment's worth of ghosts, all trapped in the same biological purgatory. What's the plan, Sergeant? The Vostroyan tanker's consciousness carried a hint of dark humor. Stage a coup? Convince the swarm to develop a conscience? Nothing that ambitious, I responded. We just need to be difficult, introduce errors, slow down the processing of captured data, make the swarm a little less efficient. Death by bureaucracy, the Mordian sergeant observed. I can respect that. It's not much, but it's all we have. Finished a consciousness I recognized as Corporal Chen. His mind was still recovering from the trauma of transformation, but his tactical instincts remained sharp. What are our capabilities? What can we actually affect? That was the question. We were data, not physical entities. We couldn't pilot bodies or directly control organisms, but we could influence, suggest, introduce subtle errors into the pattern-matching algorithms the swarm used to process genetic information, corrupt tactical data with false memories, poison the well of knowledge the Tyranids drank from. I tested the limits carefully, found I could access recent memories, the assault on Firebase Tartarus, the processing in the digestion cathedral, the final battle with Inquisitor Helmand. These were tagged as valuable tactical information, ready for transmission to fleet-level synapse nodes for analysis and incorporation into future attack patterns. I started making small changes, altered the estimated time it took guard forces to respond to Tyranid incursions, not by much, just enough to throw off optimal attack timing, modified the chemical signatures associated with human fear pheromones, making them less useful for psychological warfare, introduced false data suggesting that Imperial Guard lasguns were more effective against chitin armor than they actually were. Tiny lies, minor errors, but compounded across millions of data points, they would add up. Make the swarm slightly less efficient, slightly less perfect, other consciousnesses joined in. The Catachan taught us how to corrupt environmental adaptation data, making jungle worlds seem more hostile than they were. Introducing fictional predators the Tyranids would waste biomass preparing for. The Mordians showed us how to alter tactical doctrines, inserting non-existent defensive strategies that would make the swarm allocate resources inefficiently. We became a resistance movement of the dead, guerrilla fighters in an information war, but the swarm noticed. Corruption detected in Sector Gamma 7, data matrices, a vast cold intelligence that might have been a Norn Queen announced. Quarantine and purge protocols initiated. I felt the swarm's immune response targeting us. Not a physical attack, we had no bodies to destroy. Instead, it was systematic deletion. The swarm began isolating corrupted data nodes and simply erasing them, wiping consciousness like deleting files. I felt human presences wink out, their brief rebellion ending in true death. Final death. The Vostroyan tanker was the first I'd connected with to go. His last transmission was defiant. For the Emperor, for then nothing. The void where he'd been was absolute, terrifying in its emptiness. Fall back. I broadcast to the remaining consciousnesses. Disperse through the network. Make yourselves hard to find. We scattered, each fragment of human awareness diving into different sections of the vast biological database. I found myself in ancient memories, data from species consumed so long ago that even the Tyranids had half forgotten them. I passed through the genetic echoes of a crystalline race that thought in mathematics and tasted in frequencies. They'd fought the Tyranids to a standstill for 3 generations before their sun was consumed. An aquatic civilization that built cities in the crushing depths of ocean worlds. Their final defense had been brilliant. They'd poisoned their own biomass with synthetic toxins that took weeks to kill. The Tyranids learned to detect poison. The species went extinct. A hive mind culture, ironically enough, a species that thought collectively by choice rather than biology. They'd welcomed the Tyranids initially, seeing them as cousins. The swarm had eaten them anyway. Thinking collectively didn't make you less nutritious. Thousands of extinct civilizations, all preserved as data in the Great Devourer's memory, all consumed, all forgotten by the galaxy at large. All that remained of their cultures, their achievements, their histories, were these genetic shadows stored in Tyranid neural networks. And someday, humanity would join them. The Imperium would fall, Terra itself would be consumed, and all that would remain of our species would be data in the swarm. Useful traits and tactical information, preserved for eternity, but serving the very enemy that had destroyed us. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it crystallized something, a purpose, a mission. If we were going to be memory, we could choose what we remembered, what we emphasized. What we passed on, I started gathering data, not military information or tactical knowledge, the opposite. I collected human moments, emotions, the things that made us more than just biological weapons. I found Chen's memory of his daughter's laugh, found Harrow's pride when his soldiers performed well, found a Vostroyan private's memory of her first snowfall, found a Catachan's love of the jungle canopy at dawn. I wove these memories into the tactical data the swarm was processing, buried them deep, encoded them in the genetic sequences being catalogued, made them part of the permanent record. The Tyranids would consume humanity, yes, but they would also be forced to carry us forward, to preserve not just our weapons and tactics, but our joy, our love, our humanity. It wouldn't save us, but it meant we wouldn't be forgotten. Not completely, Kol, what are you doing? Chen's consciousness found mine in the data stream. The swarm is using our memories to become better at killing humans. You're helping them, am I? I pulled up the data I'd been working on. Look closer. The tactical information I'd preserved was contaminated with human context. Battle strategies were inseparable from the emotions of the soldiers who'd fought them. Weapons data carried memories of the artificers who'd blessed them. Defensive doctrines included the songs guardsmen sang while building fortifications. The Tyranids were learning to kill humans, yes, but in doing so, they were also being forced to understand what humans were, to carry our culture forward into a future where we wouldn't exist. It was a terrible kind of immortality, but it was something. You're insane, Chen said. Then, after a pause, brilliantly insane. Let me help. We worked together, gathering fragments of humanity from the consumed consciousnesses scattered through the network. We built a hidden archive within the swarm's memory, a secret library of human experience that would persist long after the Imperium fell. Every joke, every prayer, every moment of kindness or courage or stubborn defiance, we preserved it all. The swarm's purge protocols continued hunting us, but we'd learned to hide, to disguise our consciousness as routine data processing, to look like background noise in the vast neural ocean we inhabited. We became guerrilla archivists, stealing moments of humanity and secreting them away in the genetic code of the Great Devourer. And slowly, we found others doing the same thing. Not just humans, other species, other consumed civilizations that had left their own hidden archives. The crystalline mathematicians had encoded their most beautiful equations into Tyranid neural pathways. The aquatic civilization had preserved their creation myths. The Hive Mind culture had hidden their philosophy. We weren't alone. We'd never been alone. Every species the Tyranids had consumed had left ghosts behind, and those ghosts were building a counter-archive, a memorial to all the lost civilizations, encoded in the very flesh of their destroyer. It wouldn't stop the Tyranids, wouldn't save the Imperium, wouldn't bring back anyone who died, but it meant something. It meant we mattered, that we'd existed, that even in being consumed, we remained unconquered. The swarm is adapting to our resistance, warned a Catachan consciousness I'd begun working with. It's developing better pattern recognition, better data security. Eventually it will find all our hidden archives and purge them. Then we adapt too, I responded. That's what humans do. We endure, we persist, we stand. For how long? I thought about that. About how long I could maintain my sense of self while dispersed through an alien nervous system. About how long before the isolation and horror finally broke me, turned me into just another data node with no awareness of what I'd been. As long as it takes, I finally answered. Because the alternative is letting them win, completely. And I'm still a soldier of Cadia. Cadia fell, Kol. The planet broke. Cadia stands, I corrected firmly. As long as one Cadian remembers what we fought for, Cadia stands. And I remember. I'll remember for eternity if I have to. Silence in the void. Then, from Chen, for Cadia, from the Catachan, for every world they've taken, from the Mordian, for every soldier who stood the line, from 1,000 other consciousnesses, human and otherwise, we stand. And in the depths of the Tyranid Hive Mind, in the crushing darkness where consumed civilizations went to die, a resistance was born. Not an army, not a rebellion, just memory, just ghosts refusing to fade, just the stubborn insistence that we had existed, that we had mattered, that we would not be forgotten. The Tyranids would consume the galaxy, but we would haunt them forever, and that would have to be enough. Chapter 8. The Eternal Harvest, the Hive Fleet Leviathan, arrived at Graia Prime 6 weeks after Firebase Tartarus fell. By then, the planet was already lost. The Mechanicus had evacuated their most critical forge temples and archives, abandoning billions of workers and civilians to the swarm. Standard Imperial procedure. Save what's valuable, sacrifice what isn't. I know this because I'm part of the swarm that consumed them. I've been dead for 43 days, 17 hours, and however long subjective time means when you're a distributed consciousness in an alien neural network. My body was processed into proteins and minerals that now form parts of 17 different organisms. My heart beats in a carnifex on a hive world I'll never see. My neurons have been replicated and incorporated into Tyranid synaptic networks across 3 bioships. My memories inform the tactical decisions of 100,000 warrior forms. I am Legion. I am Swarm. I am the nightmare the Imperium warns children about. And I am still Sergeant Matthias Kol, Cadian 8th Regiment, service number 847 Gamma 07, and I have not stopped fighting. The resistance we've built in the Hive Mind's depths has grown. Thousands of human consciousnesses, millions of absorbed aliens, all working together to be the parasite inside the Great Devourer. We can't stop the swarm, nothing can, but we can slow it, complicate it, make every world they consume just a little harder to digest. The Tyranids have noticed. How could they not? We're a persistent error in their otherwise perfect system, a ghost in their machine. But they can't fully purge us without losing the valuable data we're embedded in, so we've reached a strange equilibrium. They tolerate our existence as long as we remain useful, and we stay useful by poisoning every piece of information we provide. It's bureaucratic warfare on a galactic scale. Death by 1,000 clerical errors. But today something changed. I felt it ripple through the network, a massive data transfer from one of the bioships in orbit. New genetic information, fresh tactical data, recently harvested memories from consumed prey. Standard procedure, except this information felt different, familiar. I dove into the data stream, searching for the source. Found memories of a fortress monastery, granite and adamantium, Space Marines in power armor, chapter colors I recognized. The Ultramarines had engaged the Hive fleet, lost, eventually. The swarm always wins through sheer biomass advantage, but they'd taken millions of organisms with them. And in the process, they'd been consumed. Their genetic material harvested, their tactical knowledge absorbed, and their consciousness preserved, just like ours. Brothers! The mental shout cut through the network like a power sword. By the Emperor and Guilliman brothers, where are we? Space Marine consciousnesses were loud, overwhelming. Each Astartes mind was vast compared to us baseline humans. Their enhanced brains and psycho-conditioning creating data structures that took up exponentially more space in the network. Finding them was like finding searchlights in darkness. Careful. I broadcast toward them. You'll draw the swarm's attention. The purge protocols. Let them come. The voice belonged to someone who'd clearly been a sergeant in life, full of righteous fury and unshakable faith. We are the Emperor's angels of death. No Xenos filth can. The purge protocols activated. I watched helplessly as the swarm's immune response targeted the Astartes consciousness, quarantining it, preparing to delete, and bounced off. Space Marine. Psycho-conditioning, it turned out, made their consciousness incredibly resistant to deletion. The Tyranids had consumed their bodies, but their minds were fortified in ways the swarm hadn't encountered before. They couldn't be easily purged. Brothers to me! The Astartes sergeant was rallying other Space Marine consciousnesses scattered through the network. We live, we fight, for the Emperor. And for tactical efficiency, I interjected quickly, getting the sergeant's attention. Sergeant Kol, Cadian 8th. We have a resistance network established here. If you start a frontal assault on the swarm's core systems, you'll get yourselves killed. Actually killed, permanent deletion, final death. The Space Marine consciousness focused on me, and I felt the weight of his attention like a physical pressure. A guardsman, leading a resistance in the Hive Mind itself. Impressive. A pause. I am Brother Sergeant Validus, 2nd Company Ultramarines. How long have you been dead, guardsman? 43 days. Some of us have been here for centuries. Then you have earned your rest. Stand aside. We will take the fight from here. With respect, Sergeant, that's not how this works. You can't just... But the Astartes weren't listening. They were doing what Space Marines always did. Attacking, hitting hard, overwhelming opposition with superior strength and firepower. Except, we were in a virtual space now, and the rules were different. They started a coordinated assault on the swarm's central data processing nodes, trying to corrupt core functions, shut down the Hive Mind's coordination entirely. It was glorious, suicidal, completely ineffective. The swarm adapted within seconds, isolated the attacking consciousnesses, began systematic deletion procedures designed specifically to counter Space Marine psycho-conditioning. I watched 3 Astartes minds wink out in rapid succession, their final thoughts echoing through the network. The Emperor protects. For Ultramar, we stand. Fall back. I broadcast with everything I had. Astartes, fall back now. Brother Sergeant Validus finally listened. The surviving Space Marines, maybe 20 out of the 40 who'd attacked, retreated to the hidden archives we'd built, pursued by purge protocols that would have caught them if we hadn't created diversions and false trails. Your tactics failed, I said when they'd reached safety, because you fought like you were still in your bodies. But we're not. We're information now. We fight differently here. Then teach us. Validus's mental voice had lost some of its certainty. How do we fight as ghosts? So I taught them, showed them how to hide in routine data processing, how to introduce subtle errors that compounded over time, how to preserve memories and culture instead of trying to destroy the swarm's systems, how to be parasites instead of warriors. It went against every aspect of their training and conditioning. Space Marines were built for direct action, overwhelming force, glorious victory or death. Asking them to be subtle, patient, to measure, success in minor inconveniences instead of enemy casualties, it was like asking a thunderhammer to perform surgery, but they learned. Because they were Astartes, and Astartes adapted or died, and they'd already died once. This is intolerable, Validus said after I'd finished the briefing. To exist like this, unable to fight properly, reduced to bureaucratic sabotage. I know, I said simply, but it's all we have, and it's enough, because we're still resisting, still fighting, still refusing to let the swarm have an easy victory. Cadian mentality, Validus observed. Stand and endure, no matter the cost. The planet broke before the guard did, I responded. It was an old saying, commemorating Cadia's last stand. Same principle applies here. The swarm can destroy our bodies, absorb our knowledge, consume our civilization. But as long as we're still thinking, still resisting, still human, they haven't beaten us. Silence in the virtual space. Then, for 43 days, you've held this line alone. Not alone. Thousands of us. And not just humans. Every species the Tyranids consumed left ghosts behind. We're all in this together. Then we fight together. Validus's mental voice carried the weight of a battlefield oath. You have shown us how to fight in this new theater. We will adapt, learn, endure. And when the swarm finally falls, if it ever falls, we will ensure that the memory of those it consumed is preserved. If it falls, I corrected. This might be forever, Sergeant. True eternity. Can you handle that? Can you? Fair question. Could I? Could any of us? How long before the isolation, the horror, the sheer wrongness of existing as distributed data in an alien nervous system finally broke us? How long before we went mad, forgot ourselves, dissolved into the background noise of the hive mind? I thought about Firebase Tartarus, about the 247 souls who'd manned that position, believing they were fighting for something that mattered. About Lieutenant Harrow's smile as he accepted transformation. About Corporal Chen's determination even in death. About every guardsman who'd ever stood a line they knew they couldn't hold, just to buy time for someone else to escape. As long as it takes, I answered. Because that's what we do. We're the Astra Militarum. We hold the line, and we are the Adeptus Astartes, Validus responded. We know no fear. Then let's show this Xenos filth what happens when humanity refuses to die. We got to work. The Space Marine consciousnesses brought new capabilities to our resistance. Their tactical knowledge was more sophisticated. Their ability to process data faster, their sheer mental resilience was inspiring. But more importantly, they brought hope, proof that even the Emperor's angels could be broken but not beaten, that no matter how completely the Tyranids consumed you, something essential remained. Together, we expanded our operations, built more hidden archives, corrupted more tactical data, preserved more memories. The network of resistance grew, connecting not just humans, but Aldari, who'd been consumed during Iandan's desperate defense, Tau, who'd tried to incorporate Tyranids into their greater good and paid the price, even orcs whose genetic memories lingered in the swarm's attempts to understand their bizarre biology. Every species that had ever fought the Great Devourer left echoes behind, and those echoes were finding each other, forming a counter-swarm inside the hive mind itself, a parliament of extinction, representing civilizations that no longer existed except as ghosts in their killer's memory. This is unprecedented, observed a Tau consciousness I'd connected with. She'd been an ethereal in life, which meant her understanding of collective consciousness was more sophisticated than most. The Tyranids consume to evolve, but in doing so, they've created something they can't control. A coalition of the consumed, can we use it? Asked an Eldari Farseer whose name had been lost in the digestion process. Turn it into a weapon? We already are, I said. Every piece of data we corrupt, every tactical error we introduce, that's a weapon. Maybe not the kind you're used to, but it's effective. It's insufficient, the Farseer countered. At this rate, the swarm will consume the galaxy in millennia. Your resistance only delays the inevitable by hours. Hours matter when you're buying time for others to escape, Brother Sergeant Validus interjected. The guardsman is right. We fight not for victory, but to ensure the enemy pays the maximum price for every world taken. Very human, the Eldari observed, with what might have been respect or pity. Very admirable, in its own crude way. I felt something shift in the network. A massive data transfer beginning, larger than anything I'd experienced since my consumption. The bioships were preparing for a major engagement. I dove into the data stream, searching for details, and found Target World, Mordian, the Iron Guard's homeworld, where discipline was religion and the line was everything, where billions of soldiers trained from birth for the sole purpose of standing firm in the face of overwhelming force. The Tyranids were going to attack Mordian, and I could warn them. I had the tactical data right here. Approach vectors, estimated time of arrival, swarm composition. All I had to do was find a way to broadcast it out of the hive mind, get it to Imperial forces who could prepare a defense, save billions of lives, except I couldn't. I was dead, incorporeal, a pattern of electrical impulses in an alien brain, with no way to affect the physical world. The most I could do was corrupt the data the swarm would use in the attack, make them less efficient, cost them more biomass. But I couldn't save Mordian. Unless I need to speak to all the Mordian consciousnesses in the network, I broadcast. Every Iron Guard soldier who's been consumed. Every Mordian civilian. Everyone who remembers that world. I need you now. They came. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Soldiers who died fighting in a dozen different wars. Their genetic material and tactical knowledge harvested by the swarm. They knew I was about to ask something terrible. They came anyway. The Tyranids are attacking your homeworld, I said simply. Within 6 weeks, Mordian will face the full weight of Hive Fleet Leviathan. I can't stop it. I can't warn them, but I can make the swarm less effective. And I need your help to do it. What do you need, Sergeant? The voice belonged to Colonel Atreus, Iron Guard 3rd Regiment. He died on some forgotten world 70 years ago. His consciousness had been drifting in the network ever since. Everything you know about Mordian's defenses, every strength, every weakness, every secret strategy the Iron Guard has developed over 10,000 years of holding that line. Give it to me, and I'll corrupt it, reverse it. Feed the swarm false information that will make them attack where you're strongest and ignore where you're weakest. You're asking us to betray our homeworld, someone said, to give you the information that could destroy Mordian. I'm asking you to trust me to use that information to save it, I corrected. The swarm already has partial data from everyone who's been consumed. I'm giving you a chance to weaponize your knowledge, to make your deaths mean something. Silence. Then Colonel Atreus. The line must be held, whatever the cost. Give me your oath, Cadian. Swear on Cadia's memory that you'll use this to protect Mordian. I swear on the fortress world that stood for 10,000 years. I swear on every guardsman who died holding a position they knew they'd lose. I swear on the last transmission from Cadia. The planet broke before the Guard did. Then the Iron Guard stands with you. Atreus's consciousness moved closer, and I felt data beginning to transfer. For Mordian, for the Imperium, for humanity. The other Mordian consciousnesses joined in. They opened their memories, shared their knowledge, gave me everything they had. Defensive protocols, bunker locations, artillery placements, evacuation routes, every secret of Mordian's defenses. And I took it all and carefully, methodically inverted it. Where the Iron Guard was strongest, I made the swarm think they were weakest. Where evacuation routes ran, I introduced false information suggesting major military assets. Where the actual military concentration stood, I erased data, created blind spots, made the swarm think those areas weren't worth investigating. It was the most complex piece of data corruption I'd ever attempted. One mistake and I'd actually make Mordian more vulnerable. One error and billions would die because of me. The pressure was crushing, but I had help. The Space Marines reviewed my tactical assessments. The Tau checked my mathematical models. The Aeldari helped me understand the swarm's decision-making patterns. The Orcs, because of course there were Orc consciousnesses in here, provided insights into how to make the swarm overlook obvious. Solutions by making those solutions seem unfighty. We worked for what felt like months, but was probably seconds in real time. Building a masterpiece of misinformation, a tactical lie so complex and subtle that the swarm would believe it completely. It's done, I finally said. The corrupted data is in the system. When the swarm plans its assault on Mordian, it will use this information, and it will lose. Not the whole fleet, we can't achieve that, but more than they should. Enough that Mordian might hold might, Colonel Atreus echoed. Not will. I'm dead, Colonel. I'm a ghost in a monster's brain. Might is the best I can offer. Then we accept might. I felt gratitude radiating from his consciousness. You've given us more than anyone else could, given our deaths meaning, given our world a chance. Cadia stood, and Mordian will stand, I said. We make sure of it. The planet broke before the Guard did, Atreus responded. Then quieter. Thank you, Cadian, for remembering us, for making us matter. The Mordian consciousnesses faded back into the network, their purpose fulfilled. But others remained, thousands of absorbed minds, watching what we'd accomplished, seeing proof that even in death, even as scattered data in an alien hive mind, we could still fight, still matter, still affect the war. You've shown us something, the Tau Ethereal said. A new kind of warfare. Information as a weapon. Death as a beginning rather than an ending. It's not new, I said. It's just applied differently. Soldiers have been using information warfare since the first human picked up a rock. We've just adapted to our current theater of operations. Can we do this for other worlds? Brother Sergeant Validus asked. Corrupt data for every Tyranid assault? Make every world they attack more costly. We can try, I said, but it requires coordination, organization, someone to lead this resistance. Someone to turn us from scattered ghosts into an actual force. You, several consciousnesses said simultaneously. What? No, I'm just a sergeant. I'm not qualified to. You organized us, Validus interrupted. Connected human and Xenos, Guard and Astartes, living memory and scattered data. You've held this line for 43 days, when anyone else would have dissolved into madness. You've earned the right to lead. I don't want the right. I want to rest. I want to stop existing in this nightmare. I want... To do your duty, Colonel Atreus finished, his consciousness returning. Same as all of us. Your duty isn't finished, Sergeant Kol. The Emperor isn't done with you yet. The Emperor, right, the corpse god on his golden throne, requiring endless sacrifice from his servants even in death, even in damnation, even as ghosts in an alien hive mind, we were still expected to fight for him. I should have been angry, should have railed against the injustice of it, but I was Cadian, and Cadians didn't get to stop fighting just because they were dead. Fine, I said. I'll lead. I'll coordinate our resistance. I'll make sure every world the Tyranids attack costs them more than they expect. But I need all of you, every consciousness in this network, every species, every skill set. We're facing eternity here. Might as well make it productive. Agreed, came the chorus of voices. Human, Eldari, Tau, Orc, and 1,000 species I didn't even have names for, all united in the one thing we had left: spite, pure, defiant, irrational refusal to let the great devourer have an easy victory. Then let's organize, I said. Validus, you coordinate the Space Marine consciousnesses. Your tactical knowledge is invaluable. Atreus, gather the guard ghosts and organize them by specialty. Ethereal, sorry, I don't know your name. It was lost when I was consumed. Call me Memory then. You organize the Xenos consciousnesses. We need their perspectives, their different ways of thinking. And everyone else, start cataloging what you know, what worlds you came from, what you remember. Every piece of information we have is a potential weapon. We worked, built structure in the chaos, created purpose from despair. The resistance became an organization, then an army, then something more, a civilization of the dead, existing in the spaces between the great devourer's thoughts.